For more, we're welcoming in our panel tonight. We have David Carlucci, former Democratic state senator from New York, and NewsNation media contributor Steve Krakauer. I appreciate you both being here. David, why don't we start with you tonight? Trump repeatedly went after Cassidy in the run-up to yesterday's primary in Louisiana. The two candidates that he preferred are moving on. So what does this tell us about the president's current role atop the Republican Party?
Yeah, I think it's reaffirming what we've already known, that Donald Trump has a vice grip on the Republican Party. And I think what happened here is that Louisiana has changed their laws, right? So now they used to have a jungle primary where all congressional races, party affiliation would not matter as much. With this change, like we see in many states, just Republicans vote in their primary, Democrats vote in their primary. And what that means is that you have the most extreme in either party coming out in larger numbers. And I think that obviously worked to Cassidy's detriment. And unfortunately, I think in addition to that, this is showing that the Republican Party is standing more for just supporting Donald Trump rather than these policies. That if you disagree with Donald Trump, you might as well show yourself the door of the Republican Party. So I don't think that fares well moving into midterm elections. Maybe not in the primaries. If you're a MAGA hardcore in the primaries, that's good for you. But facing a competitive general election, that's going to be a problem.
Interesting. Steve, do you agree with that? And meanwhile, looking forward, I mean, Trump already going after more sitting Republican lawmakers on Truth Social today. We see Thomas Massie, we see Lauren Boebert here offering to take back his endorsement of Boebert if the right candidate comes along. Should they be worried about the same fate as Cassidy?
Well, we'll see. I think the Massie race, which we'll find out on Tuesday night, is an enormous one. I mean, this is really a sign of whether, I guess, what I'm about to say is right or whether David's right. Okay, because I actually don't know if it is so boiled down to Donald Trump himself. Because the real factor here in this Cassidy race is that Cassidy made himself an enemy of the MAHA movement. And MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, obviously is an offshoot of MAGA and is related to Trump's rise in 2024. But it is not pure Trumpism. And I think that the way that Cassidy made himself this foil to the RFK Health and Human Services Department, to Marty McCary, to undermining Casey Means, making sure she wasn't able to get the FDA chair, that really elevated him in the minds of not just pure Trump fans, but those who are really supportive of the MAHA movement as well. So I don't know if it's purely Trump, and I think that Massie pulls it out on Tuesday night, and I think that will be a referendum that shows it's not just purely antagonism to Trump that's going to get you a loss necessarily.
David, I want to ask about this as well. President Trump said last week that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio would be a, quote, dream team presidential ticket in 2028. He did not elaborate which for which roles. David, who do you see as the more likely candidate at the top of that ticket?
Well, look, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, right away, right after Donald Trump said that, he said, well, I'm not endorsing them whatsoever. He made that crystal clear. So it's not really giving us any indication about who Donald Trump would support. In fact, the reason why I say that is because I believe that both of these gentlemen are in a very difficult situation, right? No one who has worked for Donald Trump has made it out alive. History shows us that. Even his vice president, former governor, Vice President Pence, wound up being totally excommunicated from the party. So I think that, they've learned some lessons about how they have to stay, no daylight between them and Donald Trump. So I think that's a problem for them. In someone trying to show that they can be a leader and lead this nation, they have to be so close and mirror whatever Donald Trump says and does. So that's going to be a problem for them. So I think we're a long way away from 2028 as far as the Republican presidential primary goes. So I wouldn't read too much into this.
You're not even sure that they're going to survive politically until 2028. Right. I mean, Steve, what's your take here? And at this point, do you see either Vance or Rubio as the clear-cut leader to continue on the Trump path for the Republicans?
I think today it's clearly Vance. I know that there's a lot of momentum with Rubio. He's obviously excelling on the world stage right now as Secretary of State. I think, the way that Donald Trump said it, he kind of said Vance, Rubio, didn't say it, so I don't know if that's definitely going to be the ticket. But I do think, this is May of 2026. We have a long way to go. And certainly, you think about J.D. Vance, this is a guy who was very critical of Donald Trump for years. And then all of a sudden, he was able to come back
I'm a
into
never
his good
Trump
graces.
guy. I never liked him.
Yeah, and we came around. So there's Donald Trump loves a little forgiveness arc, redemption arc, and there's a lot of time to go in this race. But I think that right now, obviously, the polling on Donald Trump himself, the Trump administration, is terrible. So any association there is going to look bad. But I think as we get further down the line, I personally see Vance as the guy. If he chooses not to run for some reason, I think Rubio is the shoo-in.
Gentlemen, appreciate you both. Steve Krakauer, David Carlucci, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you. Thanks.